technology is technology that is simple and intuitive and easy to use. But exceptional technology is technology that is accessible. At Apple, accessibility is something that's integral to everything we do in the design of our products. And to start this, I want to show you a quick video to give you a little bit of an idea of the depth and breadth of the kind of work that we do.
People think that having a disability is a barrier. But that's not the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new.
3 miles to the summit.
You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
It's worth noting that the woman that was featured in that video, when she talks about creating a video like this one, she wasn't just talking in the abstract. She was actually the video editor that created that ad for Apple. And she is a professional video editor based out of North Dakota who went to college and got a degree from one of the best schools in the country to learn video editing. And a lot of her work she did as distance learning. So the interesting thing was most of the professors that she had, and certainly most of her classmates, never knew that she was someone with cerebral palsy who was using 2 head switches to do all the same type of work that they were doing as well. So I think she's a great example of why we do what we do in order to make sure that students and individuals in the world have access. We strongly believe that technology plays a powerful role in helping people to be more productive, creative, collaborative, to be more engaged, to be more independent, and to allow it to boost dignity. And at the end of the day, it's really about helping people to live out their dreams. Nowhere is that more evident than the work we do in accessibility. At Apple, we consider accessibility to be a basic human right, and so we build it into everything that we do. Right now, we know that there are about 15% of the world's population that has a disability, whether that be a sensory disability or a more hidden disability like autism or dyslexia or other types of learning disabilities. Now, those numbers actually correlate pretty closely to what we see in the student population as well around the globe. Every country tends to define special education and disabilities in education slightly differently. So we see some variety across the globe in what we have here. But if you really sort of average it out, we know that that 15% is probably about what we've got out there as well. But when you think about it, that's often really just about individuals who have been assessed to have a disability. They've been through a process and now they're in, some type of a program. So when we also start thinking about just how many students out there in the world could benefit from accessibility features who haven't gone so far as to, have a box checked that says they need additional assistance. These may be students who are just auditory learners or visual learners, kinesthetic learners. Every one of us learns differently. And what accessibility features bring are scaffolds to help people just be able to be more productive in their lives. So at Apple, Apple, as we design, there are a couple of sort of design principles that we hold dear with everything that we do. The first of those is that we build accessibility into the core of our products, into the operating systems. We don't bolt it on as an afterthought. We don't leave it up to third parties to do it for us. It is a part of our DNA that as we design our products, we try and think about how anyone who would want to use them would have the opportunity to do so. But the other key thing that we focus on in design is having a cohesive ecosystem. You know, as a company that owns its own hardware, its own software, and its own operating systems, we can infuse accessibility in ways other people may not be thinking about. So for example, if you had a student in your class who was blind, and their first interaction with Apple technology is an iPad, well, Apple was actually the first company to innovate in the realm of screen readers to make a touchscreen accessible to the blind. You know, when you think about a touchscreen, it's essentially a piece of glass, and they're pretty pervasive in our society. So if you're someone in the blind community, there's kind of nothing scarier than something with zero tactile feedback. But by building in a screen reader into a touchscreen, we've been able to open up the world of touchscreens to the blind community. And in doing so, really revolutionize the way the blind community interacts with technology. But what gets kind of interesting is we didn't just build it into the iPad, we built it into iOS, so it works across the iPhone and the iPod Touch as well. But then we also looked at those same gestures could be beneficial if you build them into the Mac, or into the Apple Watch, or Apple TV, or the HomePod. So we actually have the same kind of voiceover foundation that's available in every single one of our products, which means if you're a member of the blind community, learn how to use any one of our products, and you've basically just learned how to use all of our products. So for a community for whom memorization is very important, that's, once again, power and independence. That's ease of use. Now, one of the other things I think from an education perspective that's important to think about with accessibility, because often people, when you use the term accessibility, they think about the extremes. And often they may think, I don't have a student in my class that fits into that category, so why would I even open the tab for accessibility? Well, from our perspective, you know, accessibility is really more about usability. So as we design, we really try and think about accessibility as a continuum. You know, how every person in this room uses their technology is different from the person sitting to the right or left of them. If everybody pulled out their phone and we looked at all of them, every single person would have everything from different apps, different settings that are turned on their devices. And so when you think about accessibility features, they can really have great applicability in a classroom regardless of whether a student self-identifies as having a disability or not. You know, when you think about something like the area of vision, it's producing tools to support everything from someone who might be fully 100% blind to someone who might be an eyeglasses wearer or have some other type of vision challenge, all the way to students who might be colorblind or have Herrlingers or, you know, all different ranges of vision challenges. It could be in hearing, anyone from someone who's profoundly deaf to age-related hearing loss, to even situational hearing loss. I mean, we got a lot of ambient noise going on just around us right now, and how one might benefit from a tool just to support you when you just have all this extra chaotic noise in the air. From the perspective of physical and motor, it could be all the way from someone who has quadriplegia, like the woman who was in the video I showed, to someone who might have Parkinson's or some other disability that affects motor strength or maybe tremors. It could also be someone who has, maybe they just have one access point. So maybe they're only able to use one finger or a toe or even their nose. And believe me, I've been in some classrooms where I've seen students who mount iPads right here and just use their nose to be able to use the device because that's the tool that they want to be using. So we've figured out how to make all the complex gestures really all just dial down to having just one access point and be able to do anything with one finger. It could also be a short-term disability. I mean, perhaps you went out this weekend and when playing a sport, you broke your arm and suddenly you can't even use your keyboard the way you were used to, and having to figure out how to accommodate for a short-term element. even, something like a situational disability, or physical motor situation. Say you're coming home to your flat with groceries under one arm and a baby under the other. How do you even just get your front door open? Things like that, where we think about accessibility and the features that we can build in to be able to support all kinds of sensory and physical motor disabilities. But also there's the huge area of learning and literacy, and that can range in anything from autism to dyslexia. Also looking at other types of reading and learning disabilities, or intellectual and developmental delays, all kinds of things that are in there. Or even in some cases, an area that doesn't fit into any of these but is still important for some, which is vestibular motion. For some people, working with technology can be great because it almost feels like it's alive as things move in and out on the screen and move around. But for some people, that motion might be a little more than what they want. So being able to really, at the end of the day, just configure your device in a way that works best for you. To have that toolkit to make yourself more productive in your daily lives. And so at Apple, for us, once again, this isn't a single feature for a single community. This is really about being able to develop a lot of features to support all different types of learner needs. And so if you open the settings on any one of our devices, you're going to find a section in there called accessibility that's filled with a wealth of features, including many that I have listed here, that can be beneficial to support all different kinds of needs. So I want to take a moment and drill into a couple of these. And largely, the reason I want to do this is because I want to kind of change the conversation from accessibility is once again about the extremes to accessibility is productivity and how it could be beneficial for all different types of students. Starting off with a feature like Speak Screen, essentially text-to-speech. Built for example, for students with dyslexia, to be able to just have that auditory reinforcement of hearing something read back to you instead of just seeing the words. And one of the other things we've built in with Speak Screen is the ability to do word by word, sentence by sentence, or both, highlighting. So getting that multimodality of having a word spoken and highlighted at the same time. Now this can be profoundly helpful for someone who, for example, might have dyslexia or another type of reading challenge. But looking at this through other lenses as well. I actually was just talking with someone earlier today who works at a university here in the UK, who runs their disabilities office, and she was talking about the fact that a lot of her students, they encourage them to actually use it to have their own work read back to them. Because with the way that they're finding with some of their students that they process information, and I think as we all do, what you think you've written on the page may not be what you actually wrote on the page. So using that as a way to hear your own work and know that what you're writing is actually what you intended. And we often find this incredibly helpful for writing emails to your own bosses. So think about that one. But moving on from that, one of the other areas that I think this is very helpful can be in early childhood development. There was a study that was done back in the 80s in the States that was called the 32 million word gap. And what this looked at was children in different socioeconomic situations. And what they found was that children in households with lower economic situations tended to hear fewer words in the first 5 years of their life. So much so that they were exposed on average to 1,500 fewer words per hour than those who were in high income situations. So over the year, that was nearly 8 million words, and by year 4, that's 32 million words, so that 32 million word gap. Imagine using text-to-speech as a way to be able to, augment the way that you're interacting with a student, to have a book read to a student. Because in many of these situations, you might also find that that mix of having somebody who maybe English isn't their first language, or maybe whatever language you're in the country they're in isn't their first language. So if you have somebody who's trying to teach young child to read when that language is already their second language, it may be difficult. So being able to turn on text-to-speech, have that word-by-word highlighting, and just introduce words to a small child can be beneficial. Also, as the parent, just learning a second language, once again, getting that reinforcement can be really beneficial as well. And we even hear this being used by people for productivity. I have friends who went through their PhD programs in schools, having just taking their homework, turning on text-to-speech, and going for runs. So they're multitasking of commuting, whatever it might be, and getting that information along the way. So text-to-speech is something that can be used in much more broad terms than just what it might have been originally intended for, just a reading disability. Also, inverting colors. Once again, a tool that was built initially for certain types of vision challenges, but can have great applicability for example, with students with dyslexia. But also, we see this as a tool for, in this environment right now, we have a fairly dark room, and perhaps you don't want to be the person with the bright white screen running in a lecture hall in a school or in another environment. So being able to invert those colors and get white words on a black background just decreases that amount of eye strain and stress. Also, if you're a night reader, we have a joke that we've saved marriages across the globe from people who want to stay up at night and read while their partner would like to sleep. So having that ability to invert colors can be incredibly helpful there as well. Also, Safari Reader. This is a feature that has been built into the Safari web browser on our devices. And what it does is it clears out all the clutter on a page. So for example, as we all know, when you go to a news site online, chances are surrounding the article are all kinds of animated ads and videos and all kinds of things on the page that tend to drag your attention away from the content that you want someone to focus on. So by using Safari Reader, you can actually clear out all of the clutter from the entire page and just focus on the text of the article. So for a student who might easily be overwhelmed, might have some ADD, ADHD issues, being able to capture their attention and keep them focused and on task can be a really great feature. And I use this as well because I often find as an eyeglass wearer that the text that'll show up on news sites tends to be quite small. With Safari Reader, you can choose the font that you want and be able to blow things up to something that's much more legible in general. And then lastly, Magnifier. Now, Magnifier is a way to use the camera on a device to be able to magnify things out in the real world. So imagine, anything from a menu in a restaurant if you forgot your glasses, to one of the big things we saw as an example for this was medication bottles. If you can imagine, particularly amongst the elderly, if you're asked to take a whole bunch of different types of medicine and you have all these bottles lined up, the font on medication bottles tends to be minute. So being able to use that magnifier to see things out in the world. But even from an educational perspective, often students are given paper lessons, and if that font, once again, is too small to read, being able to use the magnifier to blow up the information on that page, you can change contrast and give them an ability to, once again, see it as an inverted white on black, or being able to, do yellow on blue, or whatever might be the thing that works best for that student. And all of these features are just built into the operating system. So seeing the features as sort of a giant toolkit that you can work with any student to find some features that work better for them. Great way to just be using all of these across the board, whether that student self-identifies, once again, as having a disability or not. Drill into some of the main literacy and learning difficulties that happen with kids. One of the things that comes up is having these difficulties tends to create new neural pathways to support the brain's understanding of things like letters and words. And all of those are based on the unique needs of that individual. So when we think about using technology, and to give an example, just talking about the iPad in general, There's a few ways that we see using an iPad, to help students to be able to move through the process of therapy, remediation, and then compensation. So as you start looking at therapeutic learning, it's really about engagement. And what that means is sort of looking at technology and apps in technology as almost like chocolate-covered broccoli. You know, when you use apps, there's sort of a gamification and a general boost in engagement, because things that might have been boring otherwise in a classroom 40 years ago, learning math, might now be created in a way that becomes much more engaging and interesting. And for students, particularly with disabilities, sometimes this can really be beneficial, once again, to help them to learn things like, there are apps out there that support students with dyslexia to learn the difference between a lowercase b, d, p, and q. And turning it into a whole game so that that student just starts off with that, I want to learn, I want to do this. And so they don't even realize that they're actually going through therapy. They're thinking they're just playing a game. And then moving on to looking at scaffolding and remediation. So many of these features, whether they be built-in features or features that come through apps, work as scaffolds to help students to understand how to support themselves in these environments. So for example, thinking back on that element of speak screen and text to speech, having that available to a student with dyslexia or to someone who just happens to be an auditory learner, to be able to consistently hear those words spoken and understand what they're reading on a page. But the interesting thing about this, as you look at it as scaffolding, is you can also remove those scaffolds as time goes by. So if what you want is to start a student off with a whole bunch of scaffolds and kind of almost, putting up lanes within which they stay, then as time goes by, you can start to say, okay, well, what if we remove this one? And slowly but surely bring them back to something that is more in line with other students in the classroom. Or maybe just you're always keeping them with those lanes in there. Which also then gets us to compensation. So with a lot of these tools, there are situations where maybe they're very usable, and maybe in some cases there's something that wouldn't work in a situation. Meaning, this student graduates from school, they go out and they get a job, they're in a business meeting. Can they really turn on text-to-speech in the middle of a business meeting? Probably not. Maybe they need to know to compensate and figure out what are the other features that are available to them in that environment so that they can be successful as well. So you look at that student who used text-to-speach, but maybe you have also figured out how to invert the colors or increase the font size or do other things that allow them to be able to compensate in that arena and be more successful with what they're doing. So what we know with this is technology can really just level the playing fields for these individuals. Providing therapy through these engaging activities allows them to engage in literacy and support in their, that supports their learning differences so that it slows down the gap between them and their classmates. And then with scaffolding, they learn how to have the support and guidance and confidence to be able to do the things that they need to do on that device, just like everybody else. But then as we move on to the level of that compensation, it really creates the digital toolkit that they can take out into the rest of the world for the rest of their lives and be able to use no matter where they are and what they need. And all of these things are just available in the device. So it's not carrying around multiple different single-use devices or elements. It's everything just built into one almost Swiss Army knife of a device, so it's available to them in everything they need. So one of the reasons that I'm here in London this week is we're actually launching a couple of programs that support education in general but have great applicability around students with special needs. The first of which is a program, or adding resources to a program called Everyone Can Code. Now, Everyone Can Code is a program that we developed to support students learning coding in general through a program called Swift Playgrounds. And as I mentioned early on in this, when Apple designs any of our product, box. We build accessibility in at the core, and we build it in, at the start so that it's always there for everyone. And for any of you who might be familiar with Swift Playgrounds and using it to teach students to code, one of the things that we have done right from the start was to make sure that it was accessible. So 3 years ago, when Swift Playgrounds came out, students who are blind or who are wheelchair users or who were in the deaf community could use Swift Playgrounds to code just as easily as anybody else could. But over the course of this last year, we've decided that we needed to do a little bit more to make sure that people were really aware of this and that they were getting the most out of it. So we've spent the last year working on some additional resources like visual tactile maps, so that a student can actually feel what is going on the level that they're on their iPad in Swift Playgrounds in order to be able to better code and learn to code. And so we're working with the RNIB as of this week. We've partnered with them, and they are putting out some resources to support the UK market with things like these digital tactile maps in order to be able to support students who are blind in the UK. And we actually had the opportunity this week to go to Linden Lodge. This is a photo of some of the students at Linden, which is a school in the Wandsworth area in Greater London, which supports students who are blind and low vision and also those with additional multi-disability issues we worked with them to learn to code. And they spent about 2 hours just playing with Swift Playgrounds, having never touched it before, and came out of it learning the basics of how to code. The other program that we're launching this week is really about the power of creativity. We know that there's an artist in all of us. And in fact, creativity can have a profound impact on self-expression and communication. And we see this on multiple fronts. When you think about kids who might have autism spectrum disorder, might have an intellectual or developmental delay, sensory, other situations, there's areas where conventional communication may not work for them. But being able to unleash the power of creativity and express yourself in other means can be incredibly important for students who have all different types of disabilities. So this week we are launching out another program to go with Everyone Can Code called Everyone Can Create. And I encourage you after this to go to the Apple booth right outside these doors and take a little bit of time to experience some of this, because I think as we look at how creativity is so important in people's lives and how that self-expression could be so powerful for students, it's a great way to be able to move that into your classroom and help a wide variety of students be able to express themselves in wonderful ways. So just to close, I want to leave you with two resources up here. The first one, apple.com/accessibility, is our mini site, which goes into all the features that we support. I know I only talked about a few of them, but if you want to know more and you want to use these features to help your students, please go here. And also accessibility@apple.com, which is a customer-facing email address. If you have questions for us, please write to us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know more of what you're doing in your classrooms and how we can help. Thank you.